Welcome everybody to another heart-pounding edition of What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Before we start, of course, there's always the obligatory disclaimers. But before we get to the disclaimers, really quick, thanks everybody who's on. Thanks everybody who is going to be on later. And thanks everybody who will be watching this after the live has ended. I used to call this the Paranormal Fireside Chats with Mike the Naked Bigfoot, but considering some of the topics that I cover, I figured that what the fuck was a much better name for it. So expect to see what WTF used frequently in the various descriptions of future posts and live sessions. Okay, tonight's disclaimers. As always, the views and opinions of your humble host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot, which is me, are his and his alone. I am not here to persuade, dissuade, damage your psyche in any sort of way. My streams and my shows are meant only to both educate and to entertain. If you leave, after you've done watching one of my chats, and you leave with an intense curiosity to go forth and learn more about a particular subject I was talking about, or to explore this crazy, wild, paranormal, supernatural, preternatural world around us, I feel like that my mission was accomplished, as long as you do it safely. Because trust me, after tonight's episode, you'll find out just how fucked up and frightening the paranormal world at large can be. One more disclaimer. There will be foul language, as you just heard, that will be spoken by your humble host tonight. It is not done gratuitously. It's just a part of his repertoire. So if you're offended, especially by the word fuck or shit, damn, ass, you name it, then this may not be the stream for you. I will not be saying it every other word or every other sentence, but it will come out of my mouth from time to time. So if you have small children in the room while you're watching my broadcast, that you don't wish for them to learn of such foul language and words early on in life. Hey, welcome Heavy Metal. I do try to do 2 shows every week, sometimes 3 if we're lucky. I'll get 3 under my belt and do 3. But I think 2 is going to be my maximum for a while now. If you have any small children that you don't wish to hear such foul language, then please put your headphones on and listen to my show with headphones on, or ask the small child to leave the room. Or sit them down and explain that sometimes old people like me have issues with bad words, and I use them frequently and often. One other thing. We play a drinking game on my What the Fuck Paranormal chats. Every time you hear me say the phrase, "That's a story for another day," which I will be saying, I usually will say frequently and often, because I have a habit of wandering, of roaming sometimes with my words and with my thoughts as I'm talking to you. When you hear me say, "That's a story for another day," please take a drink of your adult beverage. If you do not drink adult beverages, please take a sip of your tea, soda, or drink of choice. And by the end of tonight's show, those who are playing the drinking game will probably be drunk as hell. And I do not encourage you to drink and drive, so do not drive. If you are in your house, go straight to bed. Alrighty. Now on to tonight's show. I just want to preface tonight's show. I just want to set the mood by telling you a quick story. It's a very, very quick story. As you can see in the description of tonight's show, I'll be talking about paranormal slash supernatural predators that exist in our world, especially here in the United States. But just to set the mood for tonight, some people have heard me talk about and seen me write about and post about our fairly large pond we have on our property here on the farm here. And we have lots of spring peepers that are down there just having lots of froggy sex and just screaming the little fool heads off. Well, I like going down to the pond and sitting down right before the sun goes down and listening to them because it's really quite beautiful. So nowadays I usually need help to go distances because it's a little ways from the main house. And I told my son, I said, I want to go listen to the spring peepers. You want to join me? And my son looked at his watch and looked out the window. He said, yeah, Dad, let me go get my gun. That's a very common occurrence here in the Naked Bigfoot household. Because my children, my son especially, my wife, our close friends, the people who spend a lot of time here on the farm, are well aware that there are things that truly go bump in the night out there. Not only do they go bump in the night, but they can rip your arms and legs off and beat you to death with them too. So my son never leaves the house when the sun's going down, even to go out to get in his vehicle to go somewhere. He always goes armed. He has a gun on him, a pistol or shotgun or one of his AR pistols or something like that. He always has something on him because he knows what's both of what I've told him of what's out there and the things that he's experienced growing up here on the farm. He knows that there are things that defy logic, that live around us and take advantage of the night, especially here, that can hurt you, possibly kill you, and more than likely eat you as well. I just wanted to tell that quick story to set tonight's mood. Alrighty. Paranormal predators. Now, we're not talking about, I'm going to tell a really bad joke. It's probably going to get me in trouble. But I made myself laugh when I thought about it, so I got to tell the joke when I say that. When I say paranormal predators, I'm not talking about that time that Zach Bagans touched me inappropriately during a Ghost Adventures episode. Couldn't help myself. It's not that kind of predator. Okay. That's enough of me being an asshole tonight, but I had to work in that joke. I think it's funny as hell. I know all the Bacon's bunnies out there are probably going to fucking protest at my farm at some point, or the Bacon's bunnies are going to meet me on Main Street with torches and pitchforks for making that joke. But let's keep that as a story for another day, okay? Let's move on with the show. Alrighty. I just thought that was funny as shit. That's just funny as fuck. I couldn't help it. Oh, gods. Okay, I gotta get my shit together now. Okay, serious face. I'm sorry, but that was just funny as hell. Like I said, I'm probably going to get a cease and desist letter from his lawyers for that, or he's going to sue me like Johnny Depp sued Amber Heard, and y'all are going to see me on TV testifying about this joke that I just made. Fuck! I need to stop laughing. This is serious. Okay. Okay. This is me that I stopped being an asshole for a moment. Okay. Just for a moment. Oh God. I can see Zach Bagans testifying now. I never touched his genitalia. But I did feel a dark energy and a dark presence come over me, and my hand moved by itself to touch his gonads. But I was not aware of what I was doing. Because of a dark spirit took over my body and made me touch his penis. Oh, fuck. It's not that kind of predator, okay? I'm gonna stop now. He felt rage in touching my hairy sack. Rage that wasn't his. He yelled at my testicles loudly. But he was not aware of his actions. He didn't know where the rage came from towards my testicles. Oh, fuck. Okay, I'm gonna stop now. I'm gonna stop now. Fuck. This went on for too long. Oh, God. Heavy Metal, you got me in trouble tonight. I need to stop reading your comments. You're getting me in trouble. Oh, God. It's going to get me in so much trouble right now. Okay, back to Paranormal Predators. Now, there are two types of paranormal predators. There are the spiritual kind that are more parasitic and more ephemeral, that most of the time don't have any kind of mortal body. And then there are the paranormal predators that exist, who are more than physical. They don't exist. I mean, they don't exist in both worlds, both in the spirit world and in the physical world that we currently walk and talk in. The ones that I'm going to be talking about tonight are going to be the physical ones. And when I first started finding out in my paranormal adventures here in the United States, especially in the Deep South, and in the American Southwest, and then again in parts of the Pacific Northwest and Canada, I discovered stories that people would tell of actual physical beings that would appear to be human. In all intents and purposes, they would appear to be human until it became time for them to take their prey. And in most cases, their prey being mankind, humanity. Which, when I first started hearing that, I, of course, slapped down bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. There's no such thing. Those are stories from books and movies that these things exist. Because when they were telling me that, of course, I was thinking of werewolves and vampires. Before I just started to research werewolves and vampires and discover that werewolves and vampires were nothing like what was in Hollywood or written down in fiction books. But at the time, that's what I thought they were talking about. No, they were talking about things that were quite a bit more insidious. Especially the stories that I heard from first and second generation German immigrants that I had the opportunity to talk to, live with in some cases, um, and study and interview. I'm going to use a term. I was debating on whether or not how much information to give out about this, um, about how much information I found out. Most of they're again, they're going to be two species, and these are species. These predators are species. They're a species unto themselves. They're not ones and twos. This is an entire. These are entire races of living, breathing um, creatures that walk among us and live among us. Um, I'll just say their names now and get it out of the way. The varger, and some people have heard me use that word on more than one occasion, the word varger. Uh, the race of the varger and the coyotero. Uh, the varger are not indigenous to the United States. The coyotero are indigenous to the United States and Mexico and Central America. They couldn't be any more different either. And they are also considered great rivals. Their tribes are great rivals with each other. But we'll get more into that later. But these races, in all appearances, they look like us. They act like us during the day. They eat with us. They live with us. Sometimes they marry and breed with us. But at the end of the day, they are monsters. And I mean that literally. They are truly the stuff of nightmares, the varger and the coyotero. Something that I found with everybody who always talked about, the people that I talked to about these two races in particular, they always use the word pretender or pretending when talking about them. They always call them the pretending people. And that was a phrase that was used both with the coyotero and the varger, being a pretending people. And what I found out by when they used the phrase pretending people is that they pretended to be human. What better way to get close to your food than to look like your food? To be the true wolf in sheep's clothing. Not knowing what they are until it's too late, until the fangs are at your throat or the claws are at your face or in your guts, and they're already eating you. These two races fall under the heading of paranormal, um, in my mind, and supernatural and preternatural. Is I do believe that they are a part of the natural food chain and the natural order of things. Um, we are not. It is the height of hubris to believe that mankind and people are at the top of the food chain. We are not. There are things that are much more sophisticated, much more intelligent, much more dangerous, that see us as food. They see us as we see the cow, as a source of nourishment. Um, but again, these pretenders. Again, they are truly monsters, truly monsters. If you haven't heard me say it enough, you'll find out why I keep saying that they are truly monsters as we go. Um, but let's start by talking about one right now. Let's talk about the varger. The word varger is actually an old Germanic word meaning wolf. It is an a very old Germanic word meaning wolf. And a really quick fun fact. When J.R.R. Tolkien was writing The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, you've heard of the warg, the wargs, the great intelligent wolves that the orcs used as mounts, and they fought alongside all the Sauron and all the other evil things of Middle Earth. Um, Tolkien took the old Germanic word Vargr, and combined it with the English translation wolf, and he came up with the word warg, and that's where warg came from. That's just a little side note for everybody, because Tolkien did a lot of research on his own as well, into the mythologies of other cultures. Now, the word, what a Vargr is, and that's what the old Germanic people called uh, this race that had its own name, but never shared it with the humans that they lived amongst. It's something that the Germans feared in the dark. It's something they knew, that the Vargr lived in the woods around them. And it was hard to tell who was a Vargr and who wasn't. So it always, when they would have a series of wolf killings, of children disappearing, and woodcutters disappearing in the woods, and people finding their mangled remains later on, um, the first thing that didn't spring to mind to a lot of the German villagers, would not spring to mind, would be a great wolf in the woods. Um, they thought that there was a tribe of Vargr that were nearby, because Vargr were nomadic. Um, they moved about freely, and moved where the food was easier and plentiful, being people. That was easier to get to. When the heat got too big, they would pull up stakes and they would move along. But I haven't told you what a Vargr is yet. I've kind of hinted at it when I started talking about wolf attacks. Everybody knows a werewolf. If you see my video that I did, my chat, my what the fuck paranormal chat that I did on werewolves, what is a werewolf? And I described the three types of werewolves. Those all were people, um, dealing with people that could become these beings. But a Vargr is exactly the opposite. A Vargr is a wolf that can assume the form of a man. I'll let that sink in for a moment. It's an abnormally large wolf that, by either paranormal means, supernatural means, magical means, whatever you want, could shift into the form of a human being. A thinking, intelligent human being. They would still keep all of their wild instincts, their eyesight, the wolfy eyesight that they have, being able to see in the dark, their keen sense of smell and of hearing. But they would assume the form of a human. And much like a regular wolf, Vargr travel in packs or clans. Sometimes, and you can read about how, when you read the stories of the Vargr, that there were entire caravans and families and clans of gypsies that were accused of being Vargr, and they were killed. They were wiped out. They were wiped off the face of the planet, killed, because the gypsies would be nearby and when killings would begin. And it was, and I have to think that maybe it was the Vargr doing it, because the gypsies were nearby, because it was easier for them to get blamed than it would be for your neighbor to be blamed. Now, the Vargr would do one or two things. They would insinuate themselves into a town or a village. They would move in, set up house in the village, appearing human the entire time, ingratiating themselves in the village, making themselves indispensable by helping to hunt food, get fields ready for crops, build buildings, do blacksmith work. They would do all those things to fit into the community. But at night, when it became time for them to feed, they would shift back into their natural form of a large wolf, and go forth and kill and eat members of the village or members of the tribe. Now, during the days when they would have attacks like that in these tribes, in these villages. Sometimes the villagers would leave. They'd break up and they would leave, or they'd move into another settlement. And when the heat came on and the food started moving away, the Vargar would pull up stakes and move away as well. The Vargar would never stay in a village if it insinuated itself if a tribe or a family insinuated themselves into a village. They would maybe stay there maybe for 4 or 5 seasons, feeding off the populace, until suspicions grew too large and they had to move on to the next town or to the next village or to even the next city. Like I said, when they shift, again, if you looked close enough at them, the way they were described, they would have vulpine characteristics or canine characteristics about them. Their teeth all seemed slightly pointed. Their eyes would be a brown-green with a yellow cast to them. Their ears would have a very subtle point to them. And even the women, and the men and the children, they were a bit hirsute. They were hairy, large, hairy men, hairy women, hairy children. But that was stuff that was easily covered up by clothing or by a hat or by a scarf or a headdress. Those were things that they could cover up and hide these characteristics from their prey, so you wouldn't get suspicious of them right away. Vargar are 100% meat eaters. They care very little for any vegetables. Well, when I say meat eaters, that's human beings. In a pinch, they'll eat a deer. They'll even eat regular wolves if they have to feed. But their primary source of nourishment is us. Now, how did they make their way to the United States, you may ask? As we know, and you've heard me talk about in previous chats, when people started immigrating to the United States, they brought with them their beliefs, their legends, their myths, their tales with them, which in turn brought their gods and spirits and the things they believed in with them. They brought them with them when they crossed the ocean. Now, the Vargar saw an opportunity to move out of the cities in Europe and come to America. I mean, it's fresh feeding grounds, for cat's sake. Absolute fresh feeding grounds here in the United States, where they would have open lands in which to live in. Now, when the Vargar came here to the United States, they became less nomadic. I say less because, much like the lycanthrope that I talked about before, which is a human that was born with a spirit of the wild within it, usually the spirit of wolf within its body when they're born, the Vargar, and they would gather together in packs, and you would actually see there were numerous biker gangs that consisted mainly of lycanthropes. But when the Vargar came, and the Vargar, of course, as a tribal animal as well, they clan type animals. Well, they like to gather together and have more of their own kind nearby. They infiltrated and started their own biker gangs in which to travel the United States, the Southwest, Canada, Mexico, and so on and so forth, where they could stop in towns, isolated towns, feed for a few nights, and then move on to the next town. And there are plenty of legends of the Southwest of wolves coming in the night, or great hairy beasts that would come in the night. Now, I actually believe, which is probably going to piss off a lot of people when I say this, that the tales of the Michigan Dogman and dogmen that were talked about here, that are spotted here in the United States in very lonely and desolate parts of the world, that I think what they're seeing is a Vargar. And they're seeing it in mid-transformation because the dog man is known for being vicious, violent, much like the Vargur is known for being vicious and violent. The dog man is known for being a predator, being, killing other animals and eating them, or going after people in a threatening manner, threatening to eat them. So, in the Naked Bigfoot's humble opinion, the dogman that we are seeing now is the Vargur that came across the ocean during the time of the Great Immigration from Europe to the United States. And you're seeing multi-generational dogmen here in the United States who are actually Vargur, who are actually these pretenders, these predators of the night. Now let me switch gears really quick. And talk about the Coyotero. The Coyotero, if you read about the Coyotero, the Native Americans of the Southwest areas here in the United States, which you'll hear me reference often, they got to spend a lot of time on a lot of reservations and got to speak to a lot of medicine chiefs who were the primary historians and storytellers. They'll talk about the Coyotero. The Coyotero was a fierce tribe of warriors, Native Americans, that were warrior Native Americans here in the United States. They would come and that they would aid other tribes in times of need, and other tribes greatly feared being on the receiving end of a Coyotero raiding party. But one thing that the medicine chiefs don't talk about very often is that the Coyotero were not human. The Coyotero, as it was told to me, I'll tell you what, if you ever get the opportunity to speak, to spend time, or to earn the trust of a Navajo medicine chief, I strongly, strongly advise you to experience it. The things you'll learn are absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And the story of the Coyotero is one of them. The Coyotero were a native race of pretenders here in the United States. Again, being like a lot of the Southwest, the Native American tribes of the Southwest, they were nomadic. They followed their food. As their food moved and the seasons changed, so did their places where they lived at. And the Coyotero were the same way. The Coyotero were never far from large tribes. They always set up their camps and their settlements near other large tribes of Native Americans, because they did feed on the local Native American tribes. But it wasn't indiscriminate feeding, and I'll get to that in just a second. The Coyotero could assume the Coyotero are actually a race of very large coyotes. The way they were described to me as they were about the size of a Saint Bernard. But these coyotes, these giant coyotes, much like the Vargur, could pretend to be human. They could shift from being these giant coyotes, they could shift to look just like a Native American from some of the local tribes, except for they were always much, much more taller and more muscular and faster, much, much more faster. And they always spooked the horses of other tribes. Now, the horses they rode were horses that they raised and that they tamed, and they were used to the Coyotero. But when they would come into another village, the horses would go batshit crazy. They just fucking lose their marbles because they could smell a predator coming amongst them. Now, the Coyotero, like I said, did not feed, and not like the Vargur. The Vargur, they did it with a little subtlety and a little guile, but they were not as, but they didn't flaunt it, but they they were good at covering up or blaming others for what they did. But the Coyotero, on the other hand, they only ate their enemies. Who are their enemies, you may ask? Other tribes. Other tribes that were having problems with other tribes. If they were going to war with another tribe, and they could afford it. And when I say afford it, they would, there would be any, furs, services, anything that, jewelry, anything that the tribe had that the Coyotero needed, like meat, well, not meat, grains. That's another big difference too. The Coyotero would also eat vegetation as well. They'd eat vegetables and such. They'd eat fish as well. They took their payment in goods and services from the tribes that needed their help. And they would be the first ones to lead they would charge into the village that they were, the other tribe that they were at war with. They were swift and terrible fighters. They spared absolutely no one. When you hired the Coyotero to fight with you or fight for you, you knew what you were hiring them to do. You were hiring them to go out and slaughter every man, woman, and child in the enemy tribe. Something that was, it was known what the Coyotero did with those that they killed. They were hired to kill. They knew it. The Coyotero would keep the bodies of the slain, and they would eat them. They would dress them like they would a bison, and they would dry them into jerky, and they would consume them. The only difference is the bones and whatever was left over of the meal, they just didn't leave out, in the woods or the deserts for the vultures to get a hold of. They actually buried the remains into the ground. They buried their leftovers. And this went on for, hundreds of years. This relationship that the Coyotero had with the Native American tribe, the native tribes of America, the native tribes of South America, and parts of Central America. The Coyotero had great, vast territories that they were known to travel in. And all the other tribes knew the routes that the Coyotero would take, and as they traveled around the country and around Mexico and around Central America. And they did their best to never set up a settlement near some of these routes, because then they were tempting the Coyotero to come in and maybe eat them or destroy their village. Okay. Those are two of the main differences, although they are both pretending races. They both are animals that can assume the likeness of a human being as camouflage. Now, I'm not saying that this is, some shit out of Predator where they can just create these shimmering images of themselves being human. No, they literally shifted from the animal form into a human form. And when they went back, because the animal form was their natural form. Let's flash forwards. Keep with the Coyotero for a minute. And let's flash forward, several hundred years. When man was, of course, when the Europeans had settled here in the United States, and they were beginning the Western expansion. When American settlers and pioneers first ran across the Coyotero, the Coyotero, they saw the Coyotero not as the giant coyotes, their natural form. The Coyoteros would always appear as humans, and they saw them as another Indian tribe. And when the pioneers and the settlers were going out west and they were pushing the Native Americans off their land, they were also pushing off the land the tribes of Coyotero. The Coyotero, of course, being what they are, fought back. Like a lot of Indian tribes did as well. They fought back. They fought the power, but They discovered that they were outmatched both in wartime technology, guns, and so forth, and in sheer numbers. There were more pioneers and more settlers than there were Native Americans, and they could easily replace. The white man could easily replace his numbers most readily, faster than the Indians could replace their numbers when they were killing each other. So the Coyotero, in an effort to survive, began to stop segregating themselves from their food. They started integrating themselves into the local tribes. The tribes the tribesmen knew, the medicine chiefs knew what was coming into their tribes to live. They saw it as a blessing and a curse. They knew that the Coyotero needed to eat. That the Coyotero were animals. But because of the reputation and the sense of honor that a Coyotero had, they were welcomed, not with open arms. They were welcomed as, my enemies, keep your enemies close, and your friend, and your keep them, just keep your enemies closer. They felt safer having the Coyotero with them than not having them with them, knowing that they were going to lose some of their children, some of their tribesmen, because a Coyotero needed to feed. Well, during the course of Western expansion here in the United States, the Coyotero were nearly made extinct. Because there were large numbers who, instead of, that would travel as packs of large coyote that were hunted by different settlements to extinction. They wiped out these coyotes, these giant coyotes. But at the same time, some of the pioneers and settlers that settled in the Midwest who were not part of large towns, who lived out on the frontier in houses, on farms, and places that they had built, the Coyotero, of course, would assume the form of Indians, and they would go to these and raid these houses of these pioneers and slaughter those families. Slaughter the families, and they would eat them. But again, the Coyotero were hunted to near extinction. But the Vargur actually played a role in the near extinction of the Coyotero. You see, predators, they don't take kindly to other predators poaching their food. And the Vargur saw themselves as superior, because by this time the Vargur had infiltrated here, had moved to the United States in large numbers. And they had, they were going out west and selling the frontier themselves as well. Oh, thank you very much. But the Vargur saw the humans, the white man, and they saw the Native Americans as well, as their food. And they would not stand by and let the Coyotero exist to feed off of their herds, the herds being us. So the Vargur made sure, whether it was true or not, that there was any Indian violence out there, that the Vargur would always lead the soldiers or the mobs to tribes of Indians that consisted mainly of Coyotero, and would wipe them out. So the Vargur worked very, very hard to get rid of the competition here in the United States. And it only made them extinct. The only thing that kept them from going extinct at this time was that the Coyotero, for the most part, migrated down to in and around the mountains in Mexico and settled there, with a few small groups remaining here in the United States. Let's flash forward again to modern times, and a lot of people, again, have never heard of these things. These are things that were only spoken of in whispers and spoken of within family units and tribal units that were aware of such things. Like with the Navajo, they're famous, of course. Their medicine chief was their chief historian that could tell the stories, of these outside Vargar that came in to feed off of their people and to wipe out the Coyotero. Because they didn't see wiping out the Coyotero as a blessing. They saw when the Coyotero were being wiped out by the Vargar, they knew that they were next. That the Coyotero were going to be replaced by a much violent and much larger predator with insatiable appetites. Okay. Let's talk about the current sketch, the current frame, before we run out of time completely. In modern times, the Vargar still exist out here. Again, I believe that we're seeing, like the Michigan Dogman, we're seeing signs of the Vargar out there. With the advent of technology, including cell phone cameras and so on and so forth, they're able to catch more of these things out there doing what they do, which of course is hunting people. There are countless, especially in our national forests. There are many things in our national forests that, people go to the national forest and are never heard from again. There are countless people, countless numbers of people that go into our national forests here in the United States that are never heard from again. Whether it be along the Appalachian Trail out where I live here, or, out west in Sierra Madre, Colorado Rockies, up through Mexico, up through the mountains and plateaus of Mexico, that the Vargar have made themselves at home in these mountain chains and mountains and these dark, deep forests. Now, they don't sit idly by and wait in these forests and these mountains and wait patiently for their food to come to them. They are active predators. They go, and again, speaking of the Vargar in particular, they will leave during lean times where their food does not come to them in a timely manner. They'll come out and they'll hunt the fringes of cities and towns, always looking for the weakest and unwary of prey. And I always tell people it's the dumbest among us, because people, and this is my experience speaking, are stupid. They don't know when to be afraid. And of course, these things make themselves look human and get close to you. And before you know it, you're facing down this incredibly large wolf that's eating you, and its brethren are coming in to feed off of your carcass at the same time. The Coyoteros still exist in the American Southwest. Very, very few of them. A few live on some of the reservations. They do not, again, they eat people, but they do have other sources of nourishment, but it doesn't provide nourishment necessary to, their nourishment from like fish and from cows and from bison. It's not enough to sustain them. Human flesh is something that will sustain them, and that's what they need to have. So hear the stories again of hitchhikers and hikers out in the American Southwest that mysteriously vanish. You never hear from them again. This is the Coyotero. This is the Coyotero picking off the weak and the stupid. If you watch some of those National Geographic videos where you'll see the lioness is chasing after the zebra or the wildebeest, they're not going for the largest and strongest there. They're going for the one that's slow, or the baby, something that's slow or hurt that they can catch easily. Well, the same thing is true for the Vargar and Coyotero. They seek the path of least resistance when they feed. But just to wrap this up, there are many, many other paranormal predators that we have. I have a bestiary that I wrote, and I have a bestiary that I inherited. Now, that's a story for another day. That describes these critters. There are many more out there. There are the Naga, which are snakes that assume the form of a human. And those are usually found in the Near Eastern areas of the world. And in the communities where Near Eastern people have settled. Um, there is the Asian, mostly Japanese, the Kitsune, which is the fox that assumes the form of a human. Um, that is also known as it's also known in Japan as being a major predator as well. Uh, uh, the Yowie in Australia. Um, I know this is going to make people laugh. I've never researched the Yowie in Australia. It was just, this is all supposition for me. But the way it's described, it sounds like something that assumes the form of an aborigine. Um, and I'm assuming it's some local animal there in Australia that assumes the form of as an aborigine, a very hairy aborigine, and eats the locals out there as well. So as always, be careful, especially on some of these dating sites that people go on, where they'll go up and they'll, Tinder, you name it, whatever, these matching sites. In today's technology, those are perfect, easy hunting grounds. They can find somebody to eat. You could go out to meet the person you're supposed to go out on a date with and end up being the one that's on the menu because they thought you looked tasty. To them, these dating websites are menus or takeout menus of people they can go and eat, that they can have come to them and eat, and they can spend less time hunting. Um, I thought you guys would like that reference there, as human beings being on a takeout menu. Well, guys, it looks like the magic time is coming upon us. Plus, I've got to go through my regiment tonight of eye drops, pills, IV, the whole fucking 9 yards to keep me alive through the night. Um, so, with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining in tonight and for listening to What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Um, Please tune in for more episodes. Please smash the like button if you liked it. You can hit the dislike button. You will not hurt a feeling. Leave comments and questions, of course, in the comments section. I can be reached on Twitter at Voodoo3, or you can Google Mike the Naked Bigfoot, because you can Google me and I will show up. You can follow me on Twitter. I will follow back. And as always, until we meet again, I'll have another awesome What the Fuck Paranormal Chat story for you again. Have a great night, guys. It was awesome to see everybody on tonight. I want to thank everybody who is going to watch this in the future who missed tonight's live. It will be available for you in the future, so please enjoy it. Everybody have an awesome night. And don't let the bed bugs bite.